There's no doubt that the Nintendo Switch has been with us for a very long time, perhaps a little too long. Consoles like PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X have capabilities that a handheld console cannot match. But despite its shortcomings and plenty of rumors about what's coming next from Nintendo, 2023 has been a busy year. Tons of titles have been released, and a lot has happened around Nintendo in general. So let's recap what really happened on the Nintendo Switch, what games were released, and what Nintendo was up to. But first, feel free to subscribe to my channel. I mostly make videos about games released for Nintendo Switch, but occasionally I also discuss other Nintendo related stuff. In January, a new Fire Emblem game was released, Fire Emblem Engage. With this tactical role-playing game, Nintendo published a game that was met with mixed reactions. The problem with the game series is that the games are usually compared against each other, and Fire Emblem Engage is no exception. A game like Three Houses had set the bar high, which meant that there were expectations that Engage would be of the same quality. Among other things, Kotaku criticized the game's narrative and pointed out that it took several steps back compared to other games in the series, but at the same time, there were those who pointed out that the game was visually appealing and had good music, so I guess the game is basically a mixed bag. But at the same time, Tsutomu Tei, the director of the game, clarified that Fire Emblem Engage basically has no connection to previous titles. He meant that the game takes place in a new world and the narrative stands on its own. So despite all the comparisons, it's probably fairest to take Fire Emblem Engage for what it really is, another game in the series, but trying to go in its own direction. A slightly different simulator was ported to the Nintendo Switch this month. Power Wash Simulator. Square Enix is perhaps best known for their ability to publish appealing RPGs. But the fact is, they also have a division that presents completely different types of games. Power Wash Simulator is one such game. The game is published by Square Enix Collective and created by Future Lab. The purpose of the game is to make money in the power wash industry. This is done by taking on different assignments and successively expanding your business. But it's a pretty weird game that really goes its own way. There are a number of expansions that really take the game in new directions, for example Tomb Raider and Back to the Future. Yeah, these are two additions you hardly saw coming, but here they are, two expansions to Power Wash Simulator. Nintendo Switch Online expanded its library of games and we had the opportunity to play a renewed version of GoldenEye. The original came to the Nintendo 64 back in 1997, and apparently it was seen as a great idea to bring one of the more popular games back to life. In GoldenEye, you guide James Bond through three-dimensional environments where the objectives can vary. Sometimes you have to find items, slaughter enemies or rescue hostages. There is also the possibility to play online multiplayer, but I have a question about this. There are so many games today that offer multiplayer that sometimes it feels like it can be difficult to find people to play with or against. Diablo 2 is one such example, where it sometimes feels like you're completely alone even though the world is open to multiple people. So what happens when the hype around a game dies down? Then there is the risk that the number of players decreases, which means that you have to wait longer to find fellow players, or that you simply sit there by yourself alone. But GoldenEye at least offers the possibility to play multiplayer. In February, Super Nintendo World opened in Hollywood. Previously, Universal Studios had created a theme park in Osaka, but since the idea was to expand, it was timely to open the doors in the States as well. As I understand it, the facility in Hollywood is a scaled-down variant compared to its Japanese counterpart. Among other things, Yoshi's Adventure and some other facilities are missing. So if you want to get the complete experience, maybe you should buy a plane ticket to Osaka. But at Nintendo World in Hollywood, you can still visit a store called 1UP Factory or drive Mario Kart, so maybe it's worth a visit anyway. But we know that Nintendo as a company has never been afraid to test new products and start projects that go beyond the games themselves. And the opening of the theme park is in line with what the company wants to convey. In an interview with IGN, Shigeru Miyamoto mentions the importance of the company's various characters. Nintendo's biggest strength is its characters and how that is used in different types of media beyond just games. And we will probably see more Super Nintendo worlds in the future, at least that's my guess, in places that extend beyond Japan and the United States. One game that received a warm welcome was Metroid Prime Remastered. The original was first released for the GameCube, but this new version includes new visuals and updated control schemes. For those who long for what seems to be a lost Metroid 4, it's at least a small consolation that we get the opportunity to assume the role of Samus and accompany her in the exploration of alien worlds. And the game received mostly positive reviews. The score on Metacritic is currently set at 94 out of 100, so the reviews are generally very good. In February came the sequel to Octopath Traveler, and those who enjoyed the first game were hardly disappointed by what Square Enix came up with. At least that's my guess. 8 new characters, a new world to explore, and turn-based combat at its best. Personally, I think the Octopath series is among the most interesting from a JRPG perspective. The balance between combat, role-playing and character development feels very good in these games, so I would like to say that Octopath Traveler 2 fits into a list of the best games released for Nintendo Switch this year. At the end of the month, a new Kirby game also appeared on the Nintendo Switch, but the game was actually a remake of the same game that came to the Nintendo Wii several years earlier. However, there were noticeable differences. The new version had improved graphics and a higher resolution. They also made some musical adjustments. In March, the eShops for the Nintendo Wii U and DS were officially closed permanently. Of course, there were fans of the older consoles who expressed their displeasure with this decision, but Nintendo had previously made it clear that since the life cycle of the Nintendo Wii was basically over, it was also natural to pull the plug on the eShop. It was time to move on, and yeah, people were disappointed. May the eShop rest in peace. A precursor to the Bayonetta games was released in March. Bayonetta Origins is an action-adventure game where you play as the witch Cereza and her demon Cheshire. The entire Bayonetta series has grown in popularity a lot due to well-developed combat systems, the game's humor, and Platinum Games' success in creating memorable characters. But even if Bayonetta Origin is the latest game in the game series, there are those who claim that it's one of the best. Maybe another game to add to the wishlist. An indie game called Wretch launched in March for Nintendo Switch. This game can be seen as a hidden gem and has largely received positive reviews. The indie scene is very extensive, and this is not least noticeable in Nintendo's eShop. There are so many indie games to choose from that sometimes you don't even know what to prioritize. Many games are strangely expensive, while others shouldn't be there at all. They just don't measure up. But Dredge is an exception. This game can be described as a fishing adventure, where you have to master difficult conditions at sea in order to catch different kinds of fish. Mid-April, Nintendo held a new Direct that focused on indie games. Most of the time there is hype and some anticipation around what Nintendo wants to show off, but their indie presentations are usually a mixed bag of high and low. This time we at least received information about some games that have aroused some interest. We got to see gameplay of My Time at Sandrock, Oxenfree 2 and Rift of the Necrodancer. So overall, it was an indie Direct that delivered some fun news. One of Nintendo's composers left the company in April, Ryo Nagamatsu. Perhaps he is not as well known as for example Koji Kondo, who is behind many famous arrangements. But Ryo Nagamatsu has over the years built up a huge repertoire that can be heard in games like Mario Kart Wii, Nintendo Land and Super Mario Galaxy. In a statement on X, he explains his decision to leave. I have made a decision to leave the company of April 30, 2023. I will work a little wider and more directly to help those who need my help and to help the industry. Now, I have always thought it was a game developer's dream to be employed by a company like Nintendo, but apparently it can be good to make new career choices every now and then, so good luck to Ryo Nagamatsu. In May, one of the most hyped games of modern times was released, Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. After the success of Breath of the Wild, which to this day stands as one of the most memorable games available for the handheld console, it was no wonder that people were looking forward to the sequel. But even though we were given a well-rounded adventure game and a huge world to explore, there were those who were disappointed. The similarities with the predecessor are too similar, and we still have to wrestle with broken weapons and search for Koroks. But Nintendo chose to expand the world, and it's now possible to explore the underground and be at higher altitudes, so basically Tears of the Kingdom is a mammoth game that offers days of gameplay. There is so much to explore in this game, but at the same time I can understand those who had expected something completely different. Ultimately, this is a duology that should definitely be played by those who want to experience the best that the Switch has to offer. But let's look at some reviews of the game. IGN highlighted the different layers of the world, the caves and sky islands, and Eurogamer shared a similar opinion, but meant that there was more value in exploring the heavens than the underworld. However, there were those who argued that the game suffered from a lack of performance. Polygon talked about frame rate issues, especially noticeable in densely forested areas. Personally, I saw Tears of the Kingdom as an entertaining adventure game despite the similarities to its predecessor. I wish Nintendo had dared to keep the essence of Breath of the Wild, but then create something different. I would have liked to see this game set in a whole new world, and not just a bunch of new layers. For all those who love simulators, a new version of Farming Simulator arrived on Nintendo Switch this month. Farming Simulator 2023 is basically a mobile game that was ported to the handheld console, and even though this is a relatively simple game where a lot is automated, there are still some things that make this an interesting simulator. For example, you can sow quantities of different crops, which requires many types of vehicles and machines. In addition, it's possible to set up production chains to earn more money. It will also recognize classic vehicle brands such as John Deere, New Holland and Ferguson, so from many perspectives, this simulator is quite true to reality. June was a relatively quiet month, but at least we got a new Nintendo Direct. It chose to show gameplay from Sonic Superstars, Palia and Super Mario RPG. But the big surprise was the announcement of Super Mario Wonder that was shown at the end of the presentation, and all Metal Gear fans must have been happy when Nintendo presented a collection of Metal Gear games. But at the end of the month, Story of Season: A Wonderful Life was released. Admittedly, there is an abundance of remakes these days, and Story of Seasons is no exception. The original came to GameCube back in 2003, so now, 20 years later, we got a new edition. In this game, in addition to farming, you can also start a family. Although there are a plethora of farming games these days, Harvest Moon and Story of Seasons have always been popular titles, especially among those looking for cozy games. In July, Pikmin 4 saw the light of day. After a slew of teasers, it was pretty clear that there was a lot of hype surrounding the game. According to IGN, it's the best-selling Pikmin game ever. More than 2.5 million copies have been sold. Apparently, Pikmin is very popular in Japan, but of course the game series has made a big impression in the West as well, and in Pikmin 4, completely new species are introduced. We are talking about Ice Pikmin and Glow Pikmin. The game received generally positive reviews where the level design was highlighted, but the puzzles and the possibility to play at night were also seen as positive elements. A sequel to Oxenfree was released in July. Oxenfree 2 can be seen as a relatively mysterious game that alludes to the supernatural, but something that I didn't anticipate was the company that published the game. Yeah, Netflix, or Netflix Games. I had no idea the company had expanded beyond its streaming services, but here we are with Netflix publishing games. Anyway, just like the predecessor, Oxenfree 2 is seen from a two-dimensional perspective and takes place 5 years after the events of the first game. Another company that now owns most of the well-known rights in entertainment is Disney. And of course, their games are represented on the Nintendo Switch. In July came Disney Illusion Island, which is a platform game where you can play famous Disney characters. Even Disney has realized the allure of Metroidvanias, and in this adventure there is a similar setup. And maybe it's the odd combination of classic cartoon characters and a subgenre like Metroidvania that makes this a winning concept. The game received generally pretty good reviews. If you are a nostalgic person, then you should probably check out Sea of Stars. In August, an RPG was released that will truly remind you of classic games from another era. The similarities to epic games like Final Fantasy IV and VI are striking in Sea of Stars. But does it really matter? Can you have too many of these types of games? Personally, I think that as long as the game has an appealing narrative and colorful characters, a lot is won. Of course, you also need to have epic fights and a combat system that is easy to use, and Sea of Stars delivers. This is definitely a recommendation if you're a fan of retro-inspired JRPGs. Another game that was ported to the Nintendo Switch in August was Red Dead Redemption. Over the years, we have seen the most unlikely games appear on the Nintendo Switch, despite the console's limitations and its ability to handle performance demanding. Perhaps many people associate Charles Martinet with Mario. Over the years, he has given Mario a voice, but in August he announced that he was done. Nintendo also made a post on X clarifying that he has a new role as an ambassador, whatever that means. And as far as I know, Nintendo was quick to hire a new voice actor. At least it's not Charles Martinet we hear in Super Mario Wonder. According to Wired, the vacant job went to Kevin Afghani, who can also be heard in Genshin Impact and in WarioWare. In September, it was time for the Splatoon 3 Championship, an event where different teams could compete against each other. Over the years, Nintendo has arranged lots of competitions and events that usually draw lots of people. The Splatoon 3 Championship was no exception. Now, I don't really get involved with esports, but I think Nintendo is right to bring people together in different ways, and this type of event is one that obviously has a large audience. We also received a new direct where the classic racing game F-Zero was highlighted. F-Zero 99 puts multiplayer in focus, so if you subscribe to Nintendo Online you can compete against loads of drivers. Nintendo themselves described the new version as a type of battle royale, where you have to perform to survive. If you are in a bad position, you risk being disqualified. A well-known franchise returned to the Nintendo Switch in September. Mortal Kombat 1 made its entrance to the Nintendo Switch, but unfortunately the game received some criticism. The Nintendo Switch version was considered by IGN to have too long loading times, problems with the frame rate, and blurry backgrounds. In other words, it can be interpreted as that the Switch version suffers from problems that may not exist for the PS5 and Xbox, and it's possible that a high-end game like Mortal Kombat 1 does better on more powerful consoles than a handheld console that's been with us for a very long time. Another game released by Nintendo was Super Mario Wonder. A completely incomprehensible game where the creators dug deep for the strangest concepts ever. You can play as an elephant, you have to jump in time to the music, and you're put through the most outlandish challenges you can imagine. But the big advantage is that the game is completely unpredictable. Each stage offers some kind of surprise, which contributes to a varied and fun experience. I rarely saw myself getting bored while playing the game. Admittedly, the 2D genre is well represented, so also on the Nintendo Switch. But Super Mario Wonder shows that it's still possible to create adventures that can captivate the player. Definitely a buy if you like Mario, but don't expect any surprises when it comes to the game's plot. Guess who is the main enemy of the game? Well, I am not going to tell ya. But one person who questioned Super Mario Wonder was Nintendo's own Shigeru Miyamoto. In an interview with IGN, a Nintendo developer stated that Miyamoto had opinions on Mario as an elephant, that he could now spray water and that it didn't resemble a typical Mario character. Well, let me put it this way. What in Super Mario Wonder can be considered typical? This game basically maxes out everything that can be stretched. Whether it's level design or what the game's characters can do, this game is over the top, and that's definitely not a negative. The fact that it's so wacky is rather an advantage. In October, Disgaea 7 was released. Tactical RPGs are an established genre on the Nintendo Switch, and fans of the series got to experience some new things with the new game. Among other things, there is an ability that makes you grow into a giant so you can deal enormous damage, but many also recognize themselves. The classic hobby is back, where you build up your troops and heal yourself, and of course you can expect cutscenes with twisted dialogues and lots of turn-based battles. The Old Faithful from Sega delivered a new Sonic game in October, this time titled Sonic Superstars. In this two-dimensional adventure there is the possibility to play 4 different characters from the series: Amy, Knuckles, Tails and Sonic. What I find interesting is the rivalry that seems to have always existed between Sonic and Mario. And the fact is that Sonic Superstars launched 3 days before Super Mario Wonder. Maybe it's just a coincidence, but it still raises some question marks. In these times, when the game market looks completely different compared to 30 years ago, it still feels a little funny that Sonic is trying to pick up a fight with Mario. If there is even any competition to speak of. Sonic Superstars sold around 4,000 copies in the first week in Japan, while Super Mario Wonder sold around 2.5 million copies worldwide in 2 weeks. So it seems like Mario is unbeatable, even though Sonic is basically seen as a strong brand. There have long been rumors and speculation about what will come after the Nintendo Switch, but in November, Nintendo's president Shuntaro Furukawa clarified that there is no truth to the rumors. Rather, he pointed out that the rumors were spread as if they were true information. What we do know, however, is that Nintendo is extremely secretive and has an uncanny ability to keep things under wraps. But we live in interesting times, and although the Nintendo Switch has been a huge success for Nintendo, it's also a console that turns 7 next year. And if Nintendo wants to continue asserting themselves against the dragons, maybe it's time for something new to happen on the console front. The living will see. In November, WarioWare was also released for Nintendo Switch. The purpose of this party game is to compete against your friends in various minigames and have fun. But I don't know if you have that much fun playing this type of game. Who am I to judge? I can't help but refer to another game that looks similar. Yeah, 1-2-Switch. I just hope WarioWare is better than 1-2-Switch, because 1-2-Switch may be my worst purchase ever. In December it was time for the Game Awards, and Nintendo had 3 games nominated: Tears of the Kingdom, Pikmin 4 and Mario Wonder. And Tears of the Kingdom and Mario Wonder were nominated for Game of the Year, but neither won. Best Game of the Year was instead won by Baldur's Gate 3, but Nintendo left the gala with a couple of prizes. Zelda was named Best Action Adventure Game, Super Mario Wonder won the award for Best Family Game, and Pikmin 4 won for Best Strategy Game, so I guess Nintendo was happy even though they lost in the Best Game category. So the year of 2023 is over, and I have to say that it has been a relatively eventful year. In particular, I want to highlight Tears of the Kingdom as one of the more interesting games released, but overall, so many games were released that it's almost impossible to cover them all. Just take a look in the eShop and you will see that it's bursting with titles. No wonder people are constantly asking for what they should play. There is so much to choose from. But now a new year is approaching, and it will be very interesting to follow what Nintendo will present. The question is whether a new console will see the light of day, and if we are treated to some real surprises. So to all of you, I want to wish you a very happy new Nintendo year. Have a good day. See ya!